Holy balls, we're back in the saddle with World 1-1 podcast. Before we get into all the super good stuff this week, let you know you can find us as always at our home at Podbean. That's world11.podbean.com. YouTube, there's a Twitch channel that's World 1-1 podcast, all one word, all spelled out. The other assorted places that you like to get your podcasts, like Spotify and Google Play or Google Podcasts now. Apple Podcasts, we're all those wonderful places. So you have all the ways to stick us directly into your earballs or just inject us directly into your eye holes. So your choice. That said, I am, as always, your host, Larry the Bearded Wonder. Joining me this wonderful week is my dear friends, Michael, Josh,
yep,
Zoe,
Yo.
and after trying desperately all year to reconnect, we finally have back with us Milton Guasti.
Hey.
Oh, I'm sure I just butchered that pronunciation on the last name.
No. Actually, you're the first person to actually get it right the first time ever in the whole history.
Really?
Yeah, congrats.
I'll be damned.
First try.
That's a win. I'll take it.
Yeah. What is it? Like what? I don't know what the proper terminology is. Like.
That would be kind of like an Italian kind of last name. Guasti.
That's what I was trying to ask, but I'm like, is it nationality? Would that be like the correct terminology for like asking what nationality your last name is?
I think it's etymology or something like that. You have to say it, doing like this with the hand, Guasti. You have to be like a slightly annoyed Italian, That's the correct way of pronouncing it.
I'm sorry. I just have that scene now from Inglourious Bastards where like the American dudes are trying so hard to have an Italian accent and they're just butchering the hell out of it. And now that's in my head.
Don't worry. I am quite a culprit of trying to bullshit my way into Italian. This is pretty much an Italian neighborhood, and there's a lot of bullshit going on. There's enough similarities between Spanish and Italian to allow some bullshit in the middle. So yes.
So, for long-time listeners, you may be familiar. Milton has joined us a couple times in the past as the mastermind behind AM2R, which was the absolutely stunning remake of Metroid 2. Which, at this point, Nintendo can suck it. You did a better game. Fuck them. So.
You better like take that back for like you get sued or some shit, my guy.
I give no fucks at this point. They'd have to notice me
for
first.
What?
So, frankly, it was their loss not picking you up and left the door open for Moon Studios. So, but we're gonna get there because Milton got picked up after everything AM2R went down and got picked up by Moon Studios to do level design on Ori and the Will of the Wisps. So, been trying hard this year to reconnect and touch base, and the pieces finally came together. So he's joined us this week to talk about and tell all about. So, let's jump in. I want to throw it to you just to kind of hear a little bit of just your general takeaway from the experience being inside the industry in an official in actual official capacity, instead of going through what was a labor of love, instead basically getting to get paid for a change.
Well, it was kind of shocking at first. It was weird because the way of working, the workflow was pretty similar to AM2R. Meeting in Skype, trying to get a little bit of project management going on, communicating with people, what needs to be done, deadlines, managing free time to actually get things done. That kind of thing was kind of similar, but the scale and the amount of insane talent that everyone in most studios has is overwhelming. It's insane. And once I actually started, seeing people in action, doing stuff what they're actually good at, it's pretty imposter syndrome-ish. It's like, yo, I'm with the big boys now. It's this is not a fun game. This is nothing that's this is not a hobby anymore. So yeah, gotta get serious about this. It's awesome. I actually got to learn quite a lot in the process, and yeah, it really helps that everyone at most studios is a really awesome human being. There are no divas, no rock stars. Everyone is super down to earth and very open to communication, and it's fascinating to see so many different points of views from the cultural sides to disciplines and how they approach creation and in pretty much any regard. So yeah, it's super awesome.
I say I'm getting the impression there was at least a moment of little fish in a big pond.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure that must be common. I mean, my particular situation is a little bit unique because I went from being a hobbyist with a very popular project to getting into the industry with a very, very talented team. So yeah, I pretty much had to deliver.
All right. So I'm curious because the world is doing it now, but you were doing it beforehand because Moon Studios is I don't know if you'd call it a remote or virtual studio, but everybody's kind of all over the globe, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Exactly. Many people from many different countries, and yeah, I'm the only one from Argentina so far. And yeah, lots of different, very thick accents. So I suddenly didn't find myself out of place anymore.
Oh, that's awesome. So I'm curious, what was it like, essentially this year, having done what the world's doing now before we were all doing it, in terms of remote work from home. Actually, that raised the question: were you working from home, or was there an office space for you somewhere? Or
I have a small improvised office here at home, and
Okay.
that's where I have my desk. And yeah, it's so weird at first. You have to develop this kind of discipline to not get carried away, because the kind of work I actually did at M2R with this kind of workflow, it was pretty much in my free time, and I pretty much worked as much as I wanted, as long as my life and family allowed. But having to be full time doing that kind of thing, yeah, you lose track of time very easily, and suddenly you find yourself working more than you should. It's quite a balance act,
Sure.
And by the time you realize you're actually kind of tired, you're not being productive, and everyone at most studios is very conscious about taking rest, giving art the time it deserves, because this is a creative process. We're not punching numbers in databases or making generic code or whatever. We are actually making works of art in some regard, and we need to be fully rested and prepared to actually properly work. And yeah, they make good emphasis on take breaks regularly. If you're not feeling it, just go out for a walk. If you're not feeling like working today, feel better tomorrow. And as long as we all keep showing progress, it's all good.
Nice. So I say, in light of the last couple of years, industry crunch being a big highlight, it sounds like Moon Studios has kind of made sure to stay the hell away from that. Or did that actually end up coming up towards the end at some point?
Up to a certain degree, there was a little bit of pressure by the end of the process. But then again, the production side of Moon Studios had to, at some points, start cutting contents. And that was a little bit heartbreaking. Part of me actually wonders what would it be like if that content made it into the game at the cost of some crunch. Would it actually justify us, part of the team, working their asses off to actually give the players a little bit more contents, or should we actually prioritize our health and well-being? In the end, we are pretty content with the final results, and yeah, it's that's what matters the most. So what actually made it into the game was very well polished, and yeah, luckily after all, yeah, crunch wasn't that much of an issue.
Good.
Can you tell us about some of the stuff that was cut?
Well, the only thing that I can actually tell you is what appears in one of the trailers, and it does not appear in the game.
Okay.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to go back and look.
Scour those, yeah.
I can spoil it for you, but if you want to do it, you know, your detective work by yourself, you need to do it.
I'm legit curious. Go for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the first gameplay trailer, there's one sequence that has a minecart in some crystal mines that actually is upside down with reverse gravity, and there's a huge jump with a lovely vista of the cavern, and that area was fully developed and in the first phase of set dressing, and yeah, that was one of the places that had to be cut.
Out of curiosity, what led to that being cut specifically?
Yeah, we needed to focus on the rest of the game. The main path and the couple of very important optional areas still needed quite a lot of polish. And yeah, we pretty much figured out the amount of man hours that's required to actually get them into good shape. So yeah, it was just a matter of time, pretty much.
What about like the first game had there was like a definitive edition that came out later that added some new areas. Is there any possibility of that for the second one?
At the moment, I don't have any information regarding that.
Fair enough.
Okay. You knew that was going to be it, right, Michael? Like,
yeah,
that's what he was going to say.
I was hoping.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I marvel at any game in that genre that manages to add content post-release, because Milton especially, you should know, given you've done this twice now, to slip new content into such a intricately and delicately woven and interconnected world map like that, I can only imagine has to be a monstrous challenge to figure out how to slide that in cohesively. And I mean, I've only seen, that I can think of off the top of my head, 2 games that have done that really, with the first Ori and Hollow Knight.
Yeah, the thing is, even if there hasn't been any changes regarding level design and contents, the tech team, all of the programmers and people getting all of the bugs and issues resolved over time, those guys worked relentlessly. There were a couple of small performance issues in some of the platforms where Ori was released on, and over time those were ironed out, and there's plenty of optimizations that have been done, both for the Switch version and also for the Series X version.
Yeah.
You're actually able to play it in 120 hertz and 4K.
I've noticed that because I actually have a Series X and I have a display capable of 120, and I'm starting to pick it up again because I didn't finish the game when it first came out. And so I've been picking it up again at 120 frames, and that's a treat to play that game at 4K at 120. That's nice. It's really cool.
Yeah, myself, I don't have a display for that, and I'm not able to actually try it out, but I've been told it's magical.
Yeah, it really for me, it's just like timing things and everything is so much easier, just more fluid, and just it flows so much better. It's like what the game was meant to be played at.
Now that raises a question, because when this came out back in March and I first sank into it, I know I had significant, and Michael, I think you said you ran into some of it too, some definite performance issues. And I'm curious how much of that was anything that got dumped on your desk to try and help with in the patching and updates post release.
Not that much. Most of the stuff was regarding metrics, where players were having difficulty. We had to move some things around here or there, some details, maybe some setups that were not working totally as intended, and yeah, that was just about it. The rest of the stuff was purely technical and performance and optimization stuff. So yeah.
I
So
will
that
say,
No, go ahead. I was just going to say that might be a good, like what was your? I know you do level design and things like that, but maybe go into a little bit more like what you actually did for these levels and what the process is to kind of like tweak that over time and everything.
yeah.
So okay, so the overall process goes more or less like this. By the time I arrived to the studio, all of the areas were already defined.
Okay.
We knew what kind of places there were going to be. There were rough estimates of what the names of the places were going to be, and a couple of suggestions of what the mechanics in each place were going to be. And every area has concept art that's pretty much a base of inspiration to know what kind of layouts and elements are going to be in place.
Sure.
And yeah, we are pretty much given a couple of directions, concept art, and we are just left to play and discover what mechanics are going to be interesting. We make small test levels with the basic geometry. We call that blockouts. And as soon as we actually find one or two gameplay gimmicks for places and ways to actually engage the player with the current set of abilities, depending on the location of this area, if it's going to be early game or late game or something in the middle, yeah, we make a nice playground showing and trying to teach the player something new that's going to be found in that place. And from that point, we make a level out of it, pretty much giving it structure, and we start immediately inviting people to actually try it out.
Sure.
I mean, not only the design team, but anyone from most studios can actually have their opinion, and yeah, it's a very back and forth process because
so it's
an
just
artist can actually
Yeah.
say, you know, this part could actually, instead of being, I don't know, some stone, it could be a tree that has fallen to the side, and there is a lot of back and forth in this kind of thing. It's super, super interesting.
So I'm curious on that note. Actually, I've got a couple questions I would love to dive into, but how much of the story was already there for you going in? So how much of the story in Ori influenced what you did in terms of level design, and how much maybe the other way around? How much of it was maybe you kind of building out hunks of the map that then had story built around it?
Okay, by the time I actually got there, the story was being finalized.
Okay.
I do remember that in the first team retreat that happened a couple of months after I joined, there was these huge meetings that were super long, and everyone was debating about how the game was going to end, how we are actually going to be handling Ku, the tiny owl that shows up in the trailer. Is he going to die? Is he going to be? Is he going to live? Is he going to be comatose for most of the game or not? Who knows? And we knew the beats that were going to be happening. The first act, the whole introduction to pretty much most of the mobility. The second act, where the game opens up for the player to actually explore in any order. And the final test with the final confrontation in the end. And all of the stuff that was in the middle was kind of murky, but we knew more or less what the general idea for the overall story was. Then again, many changes in the middle. And yeah, the fact that we have this tiny owl pretty much in a very dangerous situation in the middle of the game was a very dividing point in the whole team. There were people that were not, you know, they were not very happy with the idea of having an option. You know, one of the stories that was proposed where the actual owl dies, and having this other option where, well, the story is less impactful if he survives, but you know, that's going to be less heartbroken people here. And yeah, that took a lot of time. There were good chunks of the game that was being developed while we actually knew that this little owl was going to be dead. And yeah, things were kind of evolving, and yeah, eventually we actually got to the version that you played.
Very cool. So I'm just curious because you mentioned the blockout, and I kind of have a thought in my head. How drastically different was working on Ori in terms of level design, where it's a much more fluid and organic look and aesthetic and world, as opposed to working in pixel art like you did with AM2R?
Well, Metroid has a very distinct kind of grid-like structure.
Right.
It's all square blocks, and the game conveys the barriers that the player can actually go through or not using these icon coded parts of the scenery. And usually the geometry in Metroid is pretty much purely functional. There are walls and stuff that allows or denies access to the player to some places, and that's pretty much it. The rest of the stuff is just set dressing for making a nice looking environment. In Ori, things are very different. Every place has to feel like a place that exists, not just a collection of random walls for the player to give gameplay, right? And if we actually are finding elements on the way, they have to be contextualized. You may notice that there are no magical floating platforms anywhere. Everything that's is taking that role is either connected to some other place in the scenery or some place in the background. And if there is a little bit of physicality in it, there is a physics system that simulates the weight of Ori on it. So yeah, that helps a lot, setting the idea that this tiny little creature is actually in a place, a physical place, and getting used to that kind of thing was tricky at first. Now, once we got used to that process of having, tangible objects being part of the level, some ideas and opportunities started showing up. For example, in this water mill that happens in the first act, there is these huge wheels that the players can actually run over. And once we actually started experimenting, allowing the players get inside the wheels, then suddenly there were new opportunities to, make puzzles out of it. And there's also a set piece that shows up in the first escape, where you actually get inside of one of those wheels in the middle of the escape with debris falling and all of that. So yeah, it's pretty much this complex process of discovering what works, what are the actual props that we're going to be using, and exploring what can be done with that.
Very cool.
I have a question.
Mhm.
So, with Ori, were you given like specific levels to do, or did you have like your hands in all of them just in like one particular spot? Or were someone giving you like, hey, do these 3 levels, and that was like your section? How did that work?
It was a mixture of both. I mean, to actually keep things focused, the first versions of some places were handed out to people. We were assigned, make some rooms for the desert, for example, that explores these kind of things. And everyone would actually, make their own version of that. And it was very rare that someone actually had a full place to actually, work out. It was a very it was like a community effort, pretty much. Everyone had a say. That we were very active with feedback, and it wasn't uncommon that I actually make a starting version of something, for example, an escape sequence, then that got passed around to some other designer that would actually make a couple of changes here and there, propose an alternate version of that. Then it would actually go to some other guy that actually would actually add up with something else, and it was pretty much community. It was
Okay.
it actually, we don't have that sense of ownership over places. There are a couple of very specific set pieces that I'm super proud of, but it's super awesome to actually take something that was done by a very talented designer and actually spice it up and actually make it work even better. And actually seeing my stuff be improved by super awesome people is super fulfilling also.
I'm curious, what are some of those set pieces that that stand out to you specifically?
Well, most of the escapes, I was the one that made the first version of the blockouts.
Mhm.
And if you are actually kind of angry at some of those, I might be slightly partially to blame. Sorry.
I didn't have an issue with the escape sequences, honestly.
Really?
The escapes here honestly felt more manageable
Yeah, they're fair.
than Blind Forest did.
Yeah, one
I don't
thing
know.
that
That fucking
we
sandworm was intense.
I love
Yeah.
the sandworm part.
many people banged their head against the keyboard with that one. Maybe it was the first version that was slightly unbalanced, but yeah, nowadays it should be fair.
I didn't have as much issue with the sandworm as I think the rest of the fucking internet did either myself. I don't get me wrong, I was white knuckling it, but it didn't feel horrifically unfair. I had a couple of like technical hiccups that screwed me a few times, but I mean in terms of actual design, I didn't think it was that unreasonably done. But that's just me.
One thing that we did learn from Blind Forest is that since the escapes are evenly distributed, one on the first act, one in the middle of the game, and one on pretty much leading to the final confrontation, we did try to ramp it up with a more generous difficulty curve. And yeah, since these are actually happening pretty much immediately after the players actually learn how to properly use most of the motion tools that the player has, it did feel a little bit more like a proper final test instead of just being falling stuff. Now, we did make an emphasis on readability, showing ahead with the camera what the threat is going to be as compared to something that should be feeling more trial and error, like in Blind Forest. So yeah, there was a very conscious effort to actually give a couple of seconds for the player to understand what's going on, what's the danger, the harm, and how to, try to actually properly avoid it. It's happening all the time, and they're very fast-paced. But yeah, it should be intense and fair. And yeah, I find it super awesome that you guys didn't have that many issues with that.
No, I didn't. I mean, Lord knows I saw enough people in the forums going, fuck that sandworm, this is bullshit. And I'm sitting there the whole time getting ready for it. And I got there, I'm like, I don't see what the issue here is, but apparently it's just me.
No, the thing is, you do require quite a lot of precision with the digging ability, going blasting through the sand. And by the way, did you play with a controller or keyboard and mouse?
Oh, controller.
Okay, that's it. There's a couple of angles that are kind of tricky to get with the keyboard. So people that actually play with keyboard either get straight angles or straight diagonals sometimes. So yeah, that was kind of that's something that could have been improved a little bit.
Okay. I'm dying to know here what how this all came to be. Who made the approach? Was it you or was it Moon?
They pretty much emailed me. So I was just minding my own business one day, and suddenly a mail shows up, and it was the CEO of Moon Studios.
Okay.
And I was like, "What? Really? Do actually studios recruit people by just emailing them, just like this?"
Not, yeah.
So
It would
yeah,
suck if you didn't check your email.
Yeah. I mean, I'm super lazy with my email, and yeah, I have a backlog of stuff that I need to reply. But yeah, suddenly the planets aligned, and I did check that day. So lucky
to
I guess.
that. So
I have a question, another question. So Larry had to even explain to me what localization even was. But your name is listed underneath there too. So what did you do for localization?
So there is one huge advantage of having this very diverse, multicultural team going on, is that everyone can double check their own native language. So people from Russia can actually check if the Russian translation actually holds up or not, and so on and so forth. Now, the first pass on localization was decent in some languages and utter bullshit in others. There was many inconsistencies, and there's also this. There's a tricky part here. As far as I understand, Will of the Wisps is like a play on word on the Will-O-Wisp. creature or concept or whatever, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Now, there's this tiny detail that will-o-wisp is a concept that doesn't necessarily exist in Spanish or in Latin America. And something that's parallel to that, the kind of phenomenon that could be comparable to that, depending on the culture and folklore, has completely different names depending on the country. So that poses a problem. What are we going to be using as will-o-wisp or just the word wisp in Mexican Spanish and Spanish from Spain that actually is understandable and makes sense in all the countries where we are actually reading Spanish. So we pretty much had to gather all the people speaking Spanish in the studio and come up with a list of words that were appropriate to replace that. And yeah, it was just a matter of going through huge Excel sheets of dialogue and making sure that there were no typos, no out of context references, or gendering issues. And yeah, it was slightly tedious, and but it actually was fine to properly play a game that has been localized with care. This is something that not many people actually are aware of, but most of the time Spanish localizations in games, even AAA ones, suck. They are very badly done. It's not something that's usually priority, but many people are not very well versed in English to actually properly follow along a story. And actually seeing people take care of that aspect and be respectful about the experience for those particular players is super awesome. And it was really nice to actually be able to provide people with decent Spanish text.
I was gonna say it's got to be easier with a game like Ori because the characters don't speak any real language, so you're really just having to go in and and make sure that the written text is translated well. Whereas other games have people speaking, so they got to have people go and voice record the entire thing. So that's got to make things a little easier just having to go and do the text and not have to also go back and record everything in each individual language.
Ooh, that would have been quite a nightmare. Yes, but yeah, it was quite a challenge. Even if it was just text, there's quite a lot of dialogue out there. There's plenty of side quests and side characters, and they all have their small flavor text that shows up once you interact 1 or 2 times, and it all adds up. Trust me.
Oh, I believe it. I believe it.
I think we've hit about the half-hour mark, so let's take a fiver real quick. We'll jump back into the back half of this and keep plugging along because I know I've got some more I'm dying to inquire on here, and I'd be more than willing to bet Michael's got a few things he wants answered, or if not at least a bone to pick. Because if you don't bitch about something, I'm going to be really disappointed.
Right now, all I really want to see is the video recordings of the person who did the voiceover of the nonsense words.
I'm with you on that. I want to hear the voice. I want to see the video of the guy with the big tree voice.
Okay. Here's a tiny little bit of trivia, right? Do you remember the huge frog character?
Pollock.
Do you happen to know which actor is providing that voice? Okay, this is going to be very interesting. That guy happens to be the same voice as Sigma in Overwatch.
Really?
Really? It's a small world, right?
Yeah.
The more you know. I feel like voice actors never get the credit that they're due because you don't get to see them. So, they could be doing a whole slew of shit, but, you don't know who they are.
Well, that's especially prominent in gaming as well with voice acting is there's at least a handful that are kind of in everything, but you never realize that it's the same fucking person.
Yeah, either that or they actually get instantly married to a character and you don't hear Snake's voice with David Herder. You don't hear Snake. It's so binary in those cases.
Like
Yeah.
I was, because I'm completely obsessed with it. I was on TikTok and there was a female voice actor, and she was like, someone's like, "Hey, I know you from somewhere," and she's like, "You've probably seen me or like heard me on TV and games and stuff." And so she did this like slide, and a lot of the voices that she did were in video games. A lot of them were like games like Overwatch and like other fighting games and stuff like that. But like she had done all these like really popular games, and I'm like, I don't even know who you are, lady. Like,
Mhm.
props to you, but I don't know who you are.
See, I have the opposite. There are certain ones that I tend to follow. Like most of the voice cast from the Soul Reaver series, like are actors that I grew up with, like Michael Bell. Michael Bell was responsible for everything, every cartoon I grew up with, he was in. Like he was in the Smurfs, Transformers, all of it. So I got, as I said, like the moment I found out he was Raziel, I was like, all right, I'm in. And then I kind of, weirdly got obsessed with the whole series for a long time. And like even the guy who voiced Kane was apparently on an episode of Star Trek at one point, like
Really?
in person. Yeah, in person. And like same thing with the Darksiders series. Like as I said, I'm obsessed enough with that I've followed some of the voice actors and other things they've done. Like the guy who voiced Death was Top Dollar from what was it, the first Crow movie. He was the bad guy. He was in the Robin Hood Prince of Thieves movie. Like the voice is so distinctive. The moment he opens his mouth, you can tell. But I don't know. So yeah.
Right on. Now, if there is footage in the office around somewhere of that dude doing that, recording some of that voice, I want to see it.
Okay, I start moving some contacts, and yeah, I'll let you know.
So, but that said, let's pause for a minute, and we'll be right back after a quick break. And we're back with the back half of the show, otherwise commonly known as the third half. So jumping back in, Milton, I'm just curious, what, if anything, did you have to play role-wise when Will of the Wisps was getting ported to Switch? Or was your part all said and done and just wash your hands of it?
I mean, I pretty much had to continue testing the Xbox branches of the game.
Okay.
But yeah, it was super awesome to actually get to see the video recordings of both the initial version of the port and how we actually start evolving through each optimization. It was super fascinating. Then again, the tech team never stopped working on that, and the results and the strange wizardry that they pulled off, it's super, super fascinating to me. Then again, I wasn't involved in that, but we all witnessed the whole process anyways.
Okay.
Super cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious here because obviously, you came on board for Will of the Wisps. How much of getting into this involved you going back and familiarizing with Blind Forest first before going in and working on Will?
Not that much actually. I did have to get acquainted again with Blind Forest. Sorry, once I actually started working. I mean, part of my interview process was actually having a test, and I pretty much had a couple of weeks to make a level for Blind Forest. So I had to
Okay.
pretty much play the whole game, get used to, how the movement works, how the metrics are, how high can the player jump compared to the size of the actual camera, and those kind of things, and actually make a proper level introducing one ability. So I pretty much made my proposition. I had to defend it, and yeah, it was pretty tense to actually try to do that while I was actually on my day work at the office. So it was pretty much still a transition, and yeah, it was super awesome to actually see the rest of these designers, liking my stuff. So yeah, I had to get used to it. But after I started with Will of the Wisps, Yeah, the stuff is fairly similar at first, but the range of movement and the new tools and abilities make it into a pretty different beast. So yeah, I pretty much had to work with that at the start.
Okay. I'm also kind of curious too. What were some of the things, just skill wise and knowledge wise, that you thought would carry over well from your time working on AM2R into Will of the Wisps that did carry well, and which ones didn't go as far as you had hoped?
Well, the thing is, I mean, AM2R is very different in many aspects to Will of the Wisps. Using a template that was already determined by Nintendo from a game from 1992 is one thing. Trying to interpret something and making it into something completely different that makes sense as a whole is one kind of process. But then again, creating something from scratch with a couple of guidelines and mechanics that need to happen, maybe a couple of story beats and some concept art to actually give you some guidelines, it feels pretty different. It is nice to actually know what needs to happen in the place, and I did have the rest of the Metroid games to use as a reference to know, well, how do I introduce, for example, space jump, right? How do I actually make the environment around it to actually make it kind of tricky to get to that place? Give the mechanic to the player, and then let the player learn about how they need to pretty much fly in a very confined and safe space to then be properly challenged a couple of rooms later, right? I did have that point of reference, right? But in this particular case, there were some things that were super unique, and there was no frame of reference. So that was a little bit challenging, making the situations myself. I mean, we're going to be having this grapple hook lasso thingy ability that works one way, right? We have the ability to actually make all these scenarios escalating the difficulty from the introduction to something that requires a little bit of timing, something that requires you to wall jump and then actually grapple, something that requires you to use it in combat. And yeah, those situations had to be designed. They were not done by Nintendo beforehand. So it was unexplored territory. And it was super awesome to have a very responsive tech team. So by accident, we happened to find out that we had placed a leashing hook very close to grabbable grass. And suddenly we came up with the idea of, why don't we make the entire grass actually grabbable? So that pretty much opened up new possibilities of designing. And then if the grass was on these moving wheels, maybe we can actually use the momentum of these wheels to actually launch the player. And suddenly that brings to some other layers of gameplay and complexity. So it's a very interesting discovery process that involves the very different departments in one particular feature. And yeah, the amount of back and forth that some of these things took, it was a little bit overwhelming. It's super interesting, and that's yeah, that's was pretty much the main difference.
So I'm curious, what's something that didn't make it in that you wish had, and what's something that did make it in that you kind of look at now and go, that could have been better? Because I know you had some nitpicks and some things that you were looking to change post release and finish of AM2R that never got to happen. I'm kind of curious to see what some of those might be with Ori for you.
Most of those have to be are pretty much tied to time and resources, right? And some of the optional places could have used a little bit more love. There's this place that's called Midnight Burrows that it's pretty much a nice maze of teleporters, right? And conceptually, it's pretty much a huge puzzle that escalates, using momentum, pretty much like the Ginsu tree in Blind Forest, but in a different kind of layout, right? And there's very different ways of approaching it, depending on how many skills you have at the time. It's optional content, and it's very open-ended in how to approach it. That place, if you look at it, you know, functionally is pretty barren. It's just one side quest with just a couple of things, optional things here and there, very few enemies, and that place could have been a little bit more fleshed out. Maybe one or two side quests involving the teleporters or something. Yeah, that place could have used a little bit more contents, I guess. But the rest of the stuff, then again, the rest of the game is in a very good point. I really, really like the current version of that. So yeah, I'm good with it.
Okay. So I'm curious, and I don't know how much of this is your department per se, or how much of this maybe you're privy to, but from what I've heard, Moon's next project is way out of left field from the last two games that they've put out, obviously. But that said, though, is there even conceptually or story-wise somewhere that you would like to see the Ori series go from where it left off in Will of the Wisps?
The thing is, if you saw the ending, many people actually see it as something that's kind of sad, but in reality, this opens up quite a lot of possibilities for continuing the storytelling in that particular world. Literally, that narrative can go anywhere.
Yeah.
It would be super fascinating to see the Ori franchise expand into new horizons. Right now, I don't have anything regarding that to share, but it would be nice.
Now, oh, go for it.
The addition of the second one introduced weapons, specific weaponry.
Mm-hmm.
Did that give you any kind of issues to like in level design or anything like that? Or
Yeah, things got broken very easily, especially when making air combos and
Sure.
using up slashes with both the hammer and the sword. Oof, there were way too many skips. Sometimes we actually kind of let them slide because it's just an optional thingy that you can actually get early, no biggie. But suddenly skipping a huge chunk of a barrier that's supposed to happen in the second act and getting there early without any abilities and actually getting stuck, yeah, that was rough. So there was quite a lot of reworking on the rules on how air movements works, how many times you can actually do up slashes, and that took a little bit of work. I'm pretty sure there's still a couple of speedrunners that actually managed to break everything, of course.
That's kind of what they do.
Yeah, it's they can never have good nice things. But yeah, we had to be very careful. There's both the combat and the movement of the player is very interwoven. There's a lot of stuff that affects mobility regarding weapons, and the mobility itself is used for positioning also. So this dance that happens between Ori and the enemies is something that's both a blessing and a curse. Then again, I think we managed to actually give the player enough tools to actually enjoy the movement and being able to properly flow around in the battlefield without actually breaking much stuff. But then again, people are going to be finding ways to break it anyways.
Well, like we discussed earlier, everybody needs a hobby.
Yeah.
So now, like I said, word has it that Moon's next project is way out of left field. I'm just curious what that's starting to look and feel like for you going into this, given that, you know, your pedigree was very tailor made almost for Ori, genre wise, but if they're going someplace very different, you know, what's that look and feel like to you going into this?
Well,
without spoiling or giving away things you can't yet.
Of course,
I won't be mad
I
if
mean,
you did, but you know.
It's nothing personal. I have this ninja here actually aiming into my head, so no.
Yeah, no, the red dot on your shirt's coming through clear.
So the thing is, I always took M2R as a learning process, so it's just an excuse to learn new things, right? At first, it was basic programming, then it was game design, then it was level design, then it was game production, right? Every step of the way, I was learning something new, and that's why I kept pretty much engaged on it, right? And this particular new project is quite different to the stuff that I've been doing so far, and I do consider that this is a good thing. There is this new possibility of actually growing as a professional and not being just a one-trick pony, the Metroidvania level guy. So yes, I'm super excited to see where this is going to be taking us, all of us. Again, cool. I wish I could actually speak more about it, but it's going to be super awesome.
I'm gonna toss a dart in the dark here and assume there's exactly zero you can say on the subject, or is there anything that's at least fair game to tease with?
The only thing is that I can say is what's already public, and you're well aware of that. So
yeah, I figured, but you never know. Hey, waste not, want not.
Yeah.
No, so. It's okay. Where's my canned response? Yes. At this moment, there is nothing I can share with you. Please check it back later. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Doug Bowser.
Yeah.
So, but with what you've accomplished, I mean, first of all, you know, what was it like getting to see your work recognized in an official, like, literal award-winning capacity? Because Ori took home awards this year.
Yes, that was awesome. Yeah, it was. First of all, it kind of sucks that we are remote, because this was a super awesome excuse to actually, you know, getting drunk together with a huge screen projector and actually, you know, celebrating like you should, right? We do this after all this hard work. We had to pretty much do something more, you know, Skype based to commemorate, but it was awesome. It's really cool to get recognition, even if you know, the credibility of awards is not as solid as it used to be. There's you know, more of these kind of things than me, but it's always nice, you know, getting recognition. It's super awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, for me particularly, I'm the guy that really enjoys seeing the joy in the player's face when they're actually completing an epic moment in escape or a boss fight or whatever, and they are having that, you know, satisfaction, that actually very accomplished face. That's pure gold for me. Awards are always nice, but actually seeing the players react and getting involved emotionally with these characters, yeah, I mean, for me, that's the best award I could actually have ever.
I would say I honestly just kind of had this thought in my head. It's like, it's nice he gets to take home an award from the Game Awards, you know, for a change, versus the year that AM2R finally rolled out, and then the category mysteriously disappeared from the awards show.
I guess
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of cool to actually be nominated in something more than 24 hours.
personal note, what's been the highlight for you this past year? Because obviously it's been anywhere from a weird to just a fucking rough year all the way around. But what's been a highlight for you?
Well, actually making it into releasing the game, that was pretty much pretty much at the start of this whole mess, and transitioning into the new project and supporting Ori throughout the optimization phase. That pretty much, yeah. I was just minding my own business, working as usual, and having this structure already in place really helped getting adapted to this new strange world. Then again, most of the big transitions regarding work and stuff, and this new way of actually living, I had to pretty much help out my family to go through that. But already having the experience and the reassurance that being able to work remotely is an option, and you can actually be productive and mentally healthy if you have a discipline, actually helped out quite a lot, helping out both my family and acquaintances that were actually trying to get used to all of this new, strange way of doing stuff.
Okay. I think we're probably coming close to a good place to close. I'm gonna throw it to everybody else. Anybody else got anything you want to toss in before we start drawing to a close this evening?
I had one question from Milton because I'm dying to know. You make games. What do you like to play?
The thing is, I'm not sure how many parallels there are with other genres and other industries, right? But I'm pretty sure that whenever you are a content creator, right? Whenever you are a movie director, for example, right? You go to the movies, and you could either choose to go as a director, trying to deconstruct every scene and why the author chose to tell the story that way, or you can actually shut that part of the brain off and enjoy it with a bag of popcorn like a normal human being. I do have these two kind of games that I do enjoy. I do enjoy the typical casual quick play round of Overwatch, even if I suck. But I do also enjoy nice, lovely puzzle games, stuff that lets you explore the worlds and their narrative at your own pace. Stuff like Return of the Obra Dinn, for example.
Ooh.
The Outer Wilds, that's super awesome. No, wait. Was it Outer Worlds or Outer Wilds? I always get those two
Outer
confused.
Worlds.
They get the two
Outer
mixed up.
Worlds.
I do that same thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
I have not
it's
gotten to
super-
play that yet, but it's on my list actually.
Yeah, it's super fascinating. The way that they actually use information as the resource that you're actually, trying to hunt down and trying
Right.
to piece together how things work. It's super fascinating for me. And then again, I do get my fair share of, Metroidvanias that I try to dissect to see what's trending nowadays. Maybe to actually steal a couple of ideas or two. Who knows?
I'm just curious. One on the back of the puzzle games. Top 3 in the last 2 years for you in the puzzle genre.
The thing is, I would actually need to play some stuff from my backlog. I'm halfway through The Witness, and I haven't played what was this one? The one with the robot? With the reflection puzzles. Yeah, I have now the Talos Principle.
Okay.
Yeah. I've been dabbling in that one too.
I picked it up and I barely started it.
Then again, ask me again after I finish those two, and I would be able to actually give you a more accurate answer.
I would love to watch you stream The Witness. I adore The Witness.
I don't know, man. I don't think I have
That
the charisma
game
to actually
can
properly stream.
go like fall in a deep dark hole. It makes my brain hurt, and I think every time I play it, I end up rage quitting because I'm like, "Fuck this."
I don't know. I haven't played that much. At least the very few puzzles I did complete more or less made sense. So yeah, okay. I'll keep it in mind.
I'm not a puzzle game person. Ask Larry, I'm not. I'm a here's your objective. Go do the objective, make the story go forward. And I'm like, yes, game, I will go do the exact thing you told me to go do. Like,
So you enjoy more the narrative and the experience, pretty much.
yes, I love a game that has a great story and makes me want to like dive into it. Gris is about the only game that I would consider like a puzzle game that I actually enjoyed, but that had more to do with just the visuals more than anything else. That game is beautiful.
Mm.
Like every time Larry suggests, "Why don't you go play a game?" And I'm like, I could throw Gris in, even though I've beaten it. I'm like, I could just go throw that in and play that again. But definitely more of the like RPG type chick. Love dungeon crawlers too.
But parallel question for you, because I'm curious, given that it's kind of your wheelhouse. Top 3 indie Metroidvanias that have been pushed out in the last couple of years. What's grabbed you the most? Because there's been a ton.
Yeah. Okay. So, okay, Action Verge has to be on the list, of course. Does a robot named Fight count as a Metroidvania? Or,
I would absolutely say so.
Yeah, roguelike Metroidvania. Yeah.
Metro-like sort of.
Roguevania?
Yeah.
Roguevania.
Yeah.
That would be it. And then again, plenty of stuff in my backlog. I would say Hollow Knight after the 5th hour.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel you there.
Yeah, Hollow Knight definitely starts a little rough. It took me a couple of attempts to
get going on it.
Yeah.
I was the same way.
This does raise one other question, and I know it's been tough, but I'm kind of curious to hear just your stance on it. How much in Will of the Wisps was informed by Hollow Knight? Because there's a lot of very distinct parallels, but I've heard interviews from others, but I'm kind of curious, at least for you.
Really, besides the fact that the protagonists have a sword and the sword is white, not that much. I mean, in surface value, that would be the most obvious parallel that you can actually draw. And there's the shard system that pretty much is something very similar to the badges.
Yeah.
There is a little bit more synergies with the shards, and the fact that you will actually level them up adds a tiny bit of the depth into that. But besides that, Ori is a pretty different beast altogether. Again, mobility is very tied to combat, and since many of the weapons either rely on the player getting good positioning using all their tools they have, and Ori has a lot of tools, and also some of these weapons actually provide mobility to actually engage into combat more actively. Suddenly, if you compare the more position-based Hollow Knight kind of combat, where you need to be in the right place at the right time and actually measure yourself in a kind of Dark Souls interchange of punishing the mistakes of the bosses, versus this graceful dance that Ori provides in the middle of a combat arena, where they are juggling through different enemies, bashing through one, shooting an arrow into another one, while they're actually just throwing a grenade straight downwards into some other enemy that is blown up, and then that bouncing enemy can be used to bash into something else to actually get more airtime and actually use some other things. It gets kind of Devil May Cry-ish sometimes with the right combination of abilities, and that kind of possibilities that we are giving the players, I think, make it a little bit more differently engaging compared to Hollow Knight. Then again, there are parallels, but the combat was pretty much thought out as something very different, something that works best with this particular character.
Okay. Oh, Michael, you go.
Was it always like from the? You said you came in a little later than part of the game had already been started and designed. Were bosses always a part of it? Since the first one had no bosses or anything like that, just the escape sequences.
Mm-hmm.
The second one, obviously, had several bosses.
Definitely
Was
got
that
more
always a
combat
part of it?
centric.
What's that?
I say that along with the fact that Will of the Wisp was definitely more combat heavy than Blind Forest.
So yes, bosses were already there in the plan, yes. How exactly they were going to be behaving and what was going to be happening in between some of the phases, that was up to the people that designed the environments. I was in charge of, working on a couple of small parts of some of these mini escapes that happen, mostly optimizing and improving stuff done by other designers. Yeah, the thing is, we have these huge character models. We had to figure out what the behaviors are going to be, try something out. It didn't work. Then try to rethink it again with a more simplified kind of gameplay loop to actually make it more predictable and more, traditional. And it was quite a process. The spider fight, for example, it looked very different in its first iteration. There were more specialized animations for environmental interactions that look awesome, but felt a little bit weird, and they were very expensive to produce. So actually making it a more traditional arena fight with different phases and having a transition as an escape sequence to break it up ended up being a more efficient way to actually break it up into different parts, and also having a lot more control on actually balancing the fight itself. And that happens to all of the other bosses too.
Mm-hmm.
But again, there was a separate like a separate strike team that had a designer for all the systems and all the attacks and all the balance, and animators, artists, those kind of things, pretty much trying to figure out how to actually glue it together. And I wasn't that involved with that, just a couple of layouts, tweaking things here and there, but seeing that glow up and slowly start to take shape, it was super, super fascinating.
Right on. I would throw out one last question for you just to kind of close out, unless anybody else has anything. But what's the title, the game that you're looking forward to getting your hands on and getting to spend time with the most this year?
I need to make myself some time to finally play Nier Automata.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I heard it's a very solid game, and you need to invest quite a lot of time to properly, fully experience it. And I will try to go mostly blind. I don't want anything spoiled. That's what I heard.
Okay.
Am I more or less in the right direction?
I have not played it. It's piqued my curiosity based off of and if I'm thinking of the right one, based off the fact that, if I'm not mistaken, you essentially have to play it multiple times to actually finish it.
Yeah, that's what I heard too.
So that concept kind of piques my curiosity, so long as my understanding is that was kept in mind when the length of the game was kind of set, so that it's not super bloated, so that playing it multiple times doesn't feel like a tremendous chore.
I've been sitting on it for a year and a half now for that reason. I'm worried that I'm going to start playing it and want to finish it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's going to get tedious, and then I'm going to have to slog through it just to see it.
No, my main
I
fear
haven't
is
started it yet.
My particular fear is I actually managed to finish it once. Then I actually suddenly run out of time to properly invest in it again. Suddenly I pick it up 2 months later when I actually get the opportunity and actually start playing the second time. And if this is dependent on the stuff that happened the last time, am I going to remember everything? I mean,
right.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just overthinking it.
No, it's a valid thought. So, but well, I want to say thank you so much for jumping, especially as last minute as this was. But I'm glad the planets aligned that this could come together and work. It was good getting to hear from you again. I'm glad that you've made it through this past year in one piece, and I want to say thank you for the tremendous work that you put in and the joy that you at least brought to our lives through Will of the Wisps. And congrats on being able to take home and get to put some awards on the shelf for that. It was well earned and well deserved. So
thank you so much. It's always awesome to see people enjoying our hard work. It's super humbling, and so always a pleasure to hang out with you guys.
Cool.
Thank you so much. And like I said, just thank you again. It was tremendous finally getting to get through it and finish it and soak it in. It's a gorgeous piece of work. So
yeah, I've been bugging him to finish it for months now.
At least 6, yeah.
I beat it a long time ago. I've just been waiting for someone else to finish it so I can talk at them about it.
No, it's okay. I mean, no offense. That's okay. I mean, have you seen the lineup of awesome games that showed up this year?
Yeah, that's the problem.
That's super understandable.
See, I had the exact opposite problem. Like there was just shit going on, and my will to exist kind of went out the window for like 6-7 months, and damn near the only game I touched for the back half of the year was Slay the Spire. So
you were stuck on Dead Cells for like a hot second too.
Yeah, it was before I started Slay, and then Slay took over. So, but all right. Well, thank you all so much for coming and hanging out. Special thank you to Milton. This has been an absolute delight that I've been looking forward to for quite some time. But thank you to everybody that came and hung out and listened with us this week. As always, if you've suffered this long, you should hit the subscribe button, slide us into your RSS feed. Remember, lube helps. Other than that, we'll catch you next time here at World 1-1 Podcast. Say goodnight, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Take care, please.
Peace.